Hi folks, welcome to the 21st century edition of the inaugural SciFiScavenger viewer survey. I took a look at all the results from the survey and I thought it would be interesting to see what age the books were that you'd all said were your favourites or among your favourites. And as you can see from the chart, they skew older. So 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s really are the sweet spot. And I don't know what happened in the 1990s, but then there's a smattering of books from the 2000s. But that did mean that in the top 75, most of the books were from the middle of the 20th century and a bit beyond. So I thought it would be interesting in this video to take a look at the books that you'd all identified that were published in this century, in the third millennium, just to see if there were any recently published books that we might like to take a look at. The way that I scored these books is if you made something your first choice, then I give it 10 points. If your second choice, then I give it 9 points, all the way down to 1 point if it was your 10th choice. And then I added all of those up. And the total of those scores for a given book is what's ranked, is what I've used to rank them in this in the results. So at number 50 in the 21st century cut of this data is The Wandering Earth by Cixin, who's the author of course, The Three-Body Problem. And this is a short story collection. And I haven't read it myself. So it says here is the first collection of his short fiction. These stories, including 5 Chinese Galaxy Award winners, form a blazingly original ode to planet Earth, its past and its futures. So it says on the blurb. And that was published in 2000. And then we've got A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martin with 9 points, which was published in 2019. It's the first of 2. The second is called A Desolation Called Peace, which doesn't appear in this list anywhere as far as I can tell. But it's a space opera. There's a bit of Byzantine kind of empire type stuff going on with a bit of Inca inflections. And it follows the story of a newly minted ambassador to the Tchaikovsky Empire, and she's from a little old space station that wants to maintain its independence, but there's a problem. Her predecessor, she finds when she gets there, has been murdered, or at least is a suspicious death, and she's helped in her investigations by an implant in her head, which is a backup, an old backup of the same murdered ambassador. And but it's hopelessly out of date. So between the two of them, they have to try and figure out what happened, and they have to navigate the court politics that go with this. I quite liked it, and actually I'd like to read them again. The next book is The Telling by Ursula Le Guin, which was published in the year 2000, and I don't have a copy of that, so I'm going to refer to my notes. Apparently this tells the story of Sati, a Terran sent to be an Ecumen observer. It's set in the Hainish universe that many of her books are set in. An observer on the planet Akka, and her experiences of political and religious conflicts between a corporatist government and the indigenous resistance, which is centred on the traditions of storytelling, apparently, locally referred to as The Telling. And then another one that I haven't read is Amatka by Karin Tidbeck. And I think she is, I'm going to say Swedish maybe, or Icelandic, one of the two. She's certainly Scandinavian. In Tidbeck's agricultural colony of Amatka, a totalitarian government rules over a deprived and economically depressed population. But this is no run-of-the-mill dystopia. One of Amatka's many repressive rules is the requirement that citizens routinely repeat the names of certain marked objects in the colony. And if they don't, those objects will dissolve into what the main character, Vanya, calls gloop, a formless substance that feels uncannily like living tissue. So that sounds a little bit weird and unusual. I quite like the sound of that. Her number 46 is Light by M. John Harrison from 2002. And whilst I have a copy, I haven't actually read it yet. I've only read one of his books, The Centauri Device, which I wasn't particularly a big fan of. And to be fair, M. John Harrison doesn't like it much himself either. But anyway, this book, Light, is the first of 3, and I think a loosely connected trilogy, known as the Kefahuchi Tract Trilogy, I think. And in this book, on the barren surface of an asteroid located deep in a galaxy beneath the unbearable light of the Kefahuchi Tract lie 3 objects: an abandoned spaceship, a pair of bone dice covered with strange symbols, and a human skeleton. What they are and what they mean are the mysteries explored and unwrapped in Light, M. John Harrison's triumphant return to science fiction. Meant to be pretty hard going, but rewards a patient reader, I think. Number 44 from 2007 is The Prefect, which has subsequently been republished as, what is it, Aurora Rising. And there are another 2 books that follow. But at the time this was written, it was a standalone book in the Revelation Space universe. So this is set a few hundred years before the events of Revelation Space, and it's set in the Glitter Band, which is a collection of orbiting habitats around Yellowstone. And there are hundreds of them, thousands of them, in fact, and each one is a little polity in its own right, and they're all run independently. But there are some common rules, 3 rules that they must follow, which relate to being able to vote and having access to the AI or the abstract, the sort of pervasive web, and a couple of other things. And the prefects are the police force / military for the Glitter Band, and they're there to enforce those rules. And Tom Dreyfus is a prefect, and they're quite lightly armed but pretty capable chaps, and he gets involved in a mystery involving a resurgent artificial intelligence that wants to take over. It's pretty good. Number 43 from 2003 is Ilium by Dan Simmons, author of Hyperion, of course. And this is, I have read it and its sequel, Olympus, a long time ago, probably not long after it came out, and I don't remember a great deal about it, except that it's like a retelling of the Iliad, as the name suggests, but set in space between Mars and the Earth, and involving kind of strangely powerful beings, maybe aliens / possibly reincarnated Greek gods. I don't know, I can't remember. Let's see what it says on the back. Ilium is an eloquent and exhilarating read, depicted with a frightening level of reality. It's all too easy to think that the ancient Greek gods and heroes, which he's brought to such sharp-edged life, would genuinely behave like this. Simmons has produced a razor-sharp story that is both involving and intelligent, says none other than Peter F. Hamilton. Yeah, so Ilium takes the timeless subject matter and themes of Homer's Iliad and views them through the lens of SF. The result is an astonishing achievement of pure storytelling and speculative science. 42 is Wool by Hugh Howey, which I think was originally self-published but has become pretty well known and has been televised now as the TV show, I think it's on Apple TV, called Silo, and this is the first of 3, the others being Shift and Dust. And from what I remember, I have read them but a long time ago, from what I remember, where at some indeterminate point in the future, the entire world is in a deep silo, many stories deep, and the environment and the population is managed as appropriate. And as a punishment, people can be sent outside, we assume to be irradiated by the unhealthy environment that exists out there. And then there are more revelations as the series progresses, and possibly there are more silos like this one. I remember quite enjoying it. Next, at number 41, is a book that's very much in my TBR thoughts, but not yet. I haven't yet got around to it. Is The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi. And this is a tale of Anderson Lake. He's a company man, Agrigen's calorie representative in Thailand, undercover as a factory manager. He combs Bangkok street markets in search of foodstuff long thought to be extinct. There he meets the wind-up girl, the beautiful and enigmatic Amiko, now abandoned to the slums. She's one of the new people, bred to suit the whims of the rich, engineered as slaves, soldiers and toys. They are a new underclass in a chilling near future where oil has run out, calorie companies dominate nations, and bioengineered plagues run rampant around the globe. So that's as much as I know about this book, but I really like the sound of it, and I've heard a lot of people say that they really enjoyed it, and this is at number 41. In at number 40 is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, and this really appealed to me when I read it because it's not set in the 80s, but it feels like it ought to be set in the 80s. It's set in a dystopian future world where people like to escape into virtual realities, and there's a game and people are challenged to try to win the game, and if they win the game then they win like £1 billion or dollars or whatever. And but what I really remember is really enjoying the 80s references, the cultural references, the music, the video games, the books, the TV shows. There's a frequent references to that as a sort of kind of cultural history, and that's what really appealed to me about this book. Ready Player 2 apparently is a bunch of old shite, but I haven't read that yet. And then from the ridiculous to the sublime, next is Dark Eden by Chris Beckett, which was published in 2012, and it might be Chris Beckett's most well-known book, and it's the first of a trilogy. What are they? Mother of Eden and Daughter of Eden. And Dark Eden is set on a planet called Eden, funnily enough, and it is a wandering planet. It's not orbiting a star, and so it's basically dark. The only light is provided by fire, if you can make it, or from bioluminescence. The plants and the animals that are native to the world are bioluminescent to varying degrees. So if there's a very faint light that people can see by, and when Dark Eden opens, we're greeted with a community of about 500 people who are all descendants of 2 astronauts stranded on Eden about 150 years previously. And because they're all related to those 2 individuals, there are all sorts of genetic defects, physical and mental, which kind of hobble, almost literally in some cases, the society as it grows. And it's such a richly and strangely described world, and I really loved it, and I really enjoyed the other 2 as well. And this is in the UK, first edition by Corvus, and it's rather uncommon, actually. It took me a little while to track one down, and you can pay quite a lot of money for it. I was happy to pay approximately new hardback prices for it, maybe a little bit more, including postage. And if you haven't read Dark Eden by Chris Beckett, then I really recommend it. It's a tremendous read. And number 38 is 2015 Seven Eves by Neal Stephenson, a characteristically chunky book. And this tells a story of, frankly, the destruction of the Earth. And that's really clear from page 1. The opening sentence of this book is something like, the moon fell apart. Yes, the opening sentence, the moon blew up without warning and for no apparent reason. And, nothing spectacular happens at first. It just kind of gently falls apart. And then people quickly realise that it's going to end badly, and because all of those pieces are going to crash into each other and make more pieces, and then those pieces are gradually going to be attracted to the Earth by gravity, and destruction will rain down on the Earth. And so there's a race against time to get as many people off the planet as they can, and the only place they can put people is the International Space Station, which is only mini, so they go quickly about expanding it. And the first several hundred pages are about building the space station out so it can cope with that many people. And then as it becomes clear that all life is going to be wiped out on the planet, then that space station becomes humanity, and it adopts a sort of benign dictatorship as a form of government, and kind of everyone renounces their past citizenships. And then there's a bit of politics is injected by the arrival of somebody that oughtn't to be there. I won't spoil who that is. And then about 2/3 of the way in, it does a massive pivot. There's a time jump. There's a time jump which many people dislike intensely, about 5,000 years ahead. But I really loved it. I went with it. And Seven Eves is one of my, when I last did my top 10 anyway, Seven Eves was one of my favourite books. Whether it would survive a repeat of that exercise now, I don't know. But I really like it. I've read it a few times, despite its girth. Well worth a read. Next is book 8 of The Expanse, James S.A. Corey's Tiamat's Wrath, which is in at number 37 from 2019. And I think this is the first of at least 2 appearances by books from The Expanse in this 21st century version of this list. I've read all of the books in The Expanse. I loved them when I read them, and I also loved the TV show. It's space opera. But it's close to home space opera. It's set in the solar system, and at least mostly, and follows a group of individuals who are the crew of the Rocinante, a kind of found family vibe. I probably don't need to tell you anything about The Expanse because it's been all over the media for the last 10 years or so. That series is now complete. Leviathan Falls was the last book. In at number 36 is The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North, which was published in 2014. I loved this book when I read it last year, and it was in my head living rent-free for months afterwards. It was just such a fascinating way of looking at things. This has got a great opening paragraph as well, actually. Maybe I'll do a video about best opening lines at some point. So this opens, the second cataclysm began in my 11th life in 1996. So you already know something funny is going on. I was dying my usual death, slipping away in a warm morphine haze, when she interrupted like an ice cube down my spine. And that interruption was from a 7-year-old girl who sits on his bed, quite forthright and confident, and tells him that the world's going to end and he must do something about it. He's bearing in mind he's about to die. In this world, as it says in the opening line, that's his 11th life. And this book tells the story of each of the previous lives, or at least parts of it, and how those lives then progress on up to number 15. And in this world, some people are reincarnated, and they're reincarnated with full memories of their previous lives, which can freak out a young child. And then there's sort of lots of mechanisms put around and support groups put around to make sure that they don't freak out or kill themselves. I really loved it, the way that it messed with its head and the way that they communicated effectively backwards and forwards in time. As in this case, a young person talking to an old person who's about to die. That person, when they're reincarnated, can then talk to an elderly person, and some messages can be passed backwards and forwards, albeit really slowly in relative time, and plans can be afoot as a result. Really clever book, and messed with my head for quite a while afterwards. It's a tale of, in a way, it's a tale of love and friendship and brotherhood, and good versus evil, and ultimately an attempt to try to stop things falling apart in the future, or in a different version of the future. It's very confusing. Really lovely book. Excellent. If you haven't read it, it's well worth a read. In at number 35 is Perdido Street Station by China Miéville, which was published in the year, 2000. And I have read this, but it was quite a long time ago. I remember enjoying it. It's labelled as weird fiction, and this is a rather nice broken binding edition. Actually, it's got a bit of fancy artwork on the sprayed edges. It's signed somewhere up here as China Miéville's signature. Yes, so it's set in New Crobazon, which sprawls at the centre of the world. Humans and mutants and arcane races brood in the gloom beneath its chimneys, where a river is sluggish with unnatural effluent, and factories and foundries pound into the night. For more than 1,000 years, the Parliament and its brutal militia have ruled here over a vast economy of workers and artists, spies and soldiers, magicians, junkies and whores. Now a stranger has arrived with a pocket full of gold and an impossible demand, and inadvertently, clumsily, something unthinkable is released. It is utterly bonkers and strange and weird, and the odd assortment of mutants and twisted people that are in this book are really something to behold. And I've just made myself want to reread it just by reading the blurb out, so I'm not surprised it's on lots of people's top 10 lists. Excellent book. Next at 34 is Death's End by Cixin, which I don't have a copy of because I've sold it recently. I'm waiting for my broken binding edition to arrive, and this is the third part of the so-called three-body problem trilogy. And this is set half a century after the Doomsday Battle. The uneasy balance of dark forest deterrence keeps the Trisolaran invaders at bay, and Earth enjoys unprecedented prosperity due to the infusion of Trisolaran knowledge. With human science advancing daily and the Trisolarans adopting Earth culture, it seems that the two civilizations will soon be able to coexist peacefully as equals, but without the terrible threat of mutually assured annihilation. But the peace has also made humanity complacent. Chiang, an aerospace engineer from the early 21st century, awakens from hibernation in this new age, and she brings with her knowledge of a long-forgotten program dating from the beginning of the Trisolarian crisis, and her very presence may upset the delicate balance between the two worlds. Next at 33 is Golden Sun, which is the second book in the Red Rising series by Piers Brown, and this was published back in 2015. I haven't read this one. I have read the first one, Red Rising, and it's a little bit young adult, although I gather it gets although there's plenty of blood and guts in it, to be honest. But I gather it gets a little bit more grown up and a little bit better written as the series progresses. I haven't got beyond the first book yet. I listened to that one on audiobook. I enjoyed it perfectly well. Next at 32 is Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky, not the first of his books to appear in this list, I can assure you. That was out in 2017. I do have a copy of it, but I don't have it at the moment. I've lent it to a friend, so that is not in my possession at this moment in time. It's set in a nearish future, I don't know quite how far, decades maybe, but not centuries in the future, and there are genetically engineered animal forms which are typically used for policing or for military. And Rex is a dog animaform or whatever they're called, and he is like 9 foot tall or something ridiculous, enormous, great big hunting dog that stands on 2 legs. And then there's a bear, Honey, who's excellent, actually probably my favourite character. And then there are bees that are dispersed intelligence, and there is a dragon, I think, of some kind of lizard, like an iguana type thing, I think. And they're a squad, and they just do what they're told, and Rex just wants to be a good dog. And but he starts to question his orders and starts to wonder if they might be the bad guys, actually. Next at 31 is Gridlinked by Neal Asher from back in 2001, and this is the first of his polity books, at least the first one that he wrote and published. There have been others that are effectively prequels to this novel, but this is the first of the Agent Cormac books. He's a polity agent, effectively a policeman of sorts. And he goes to investigate an accident at an Ansible gate, and there's a conspiracy behind that, which is quite widespread. And he ends up fighting among the best villains in science fiction, the Brass Man, who later gets a book of his own. It's really good, but it's been a long time since I read it, I must say. Next, to number 30 from 2013 is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, first of 3 books set in this world. Actually 4, there's another 4th one, Provenance, but the original 3 are Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Mercy, and Ancillary Sword, if I remember rightly. This one follows a soldier called Breck, who is a human instance of a starship, but in much reduced circumstances. So yeah, Breck is both more than she seems and less than she was. Years ago, she was the Justice of Torren, a colossal starship, and an artificial intelligence controlling thousands of soldiers in the service of the Raj, the empire that had conquered the galaxy. An act of treachery has ripped it all away, leaving her with only one fragile human body, but that might just be enough to take revenge against those who destroyed her. I thought there's some really interesting ideas in this, although maybe a little bit too much tea drinking for my taste. At number 29 is God's War by Cameron Hurley, which I don't have and I haven't read. But according to the blurb on Goodreads, Nyx is a beldame, a bounty hunter, paid to collect the heads of deserters by almost any means necessary, and almost proved to be the problem. Cast out and imprisoned for breaking one rule too many, Nyx and her crew of mercenaries are all about the money. But when a dubious government deal with an alien emissary goes awry, her name is at the top of the list for a covert recovery. While the centuries-long war rages on, only one thing is certain: the world's best chance for peace rests in the hands of the world's most ruthless killer. At number 28 is Redemption Arc by Alastair Reynolds, which is the third in the original, it's not, it's the second in the original Revelation Space trilogy. And this is from back in 2002, so over 20 years old now. And I have read it, but it's been a long time ago. I recently reread Revelation Space and really enjoyed it. So we're in the early 27th century, and 50 years ago, human intervention triggered an ancient alien system designed to warn of the emergence of intelligence in this sector of the galaxy. For eons, the inhibitors have waited. Now the response is on its way, homing in on a long-lost cache of doomsday weapons, which might just make a difference. Clavane and a misfit band of allies race towards Resurgam, an archaeological colony full on hard times. Clavane intends to recover the weapons for the good of humanity. Skade, an embittered rival conjoiner, has her own agenda, and she will distort reality itself to get her way. I really must reread it. I have a feeling I like this one more than the other two. I can't remember. At number 27, a book that I read more recently from 2018 is Empire of Silence, but by the very precocious and I think quite talented Christopher Rocchio. I think he had written most of this when he was like 18, 19. I think it was published when he was in his early 20s, which is outrageous. And I really loved this book. It's space opera, but with added fantasy elements. I think there are gladiators, there are sandals and swords and what have you. And there's quite a lot of it is planet bound in the first book. But it does eventually get off the ground and into space. And then it kind of kicks ass from there on in, really. I really enjoyed this book and book 2, Howling Dark, and book 3, which is called, and book 3, which is Demon in White. Less so Kingdoms of Death, book 4, and I haven't yet read book 5 or 6, which are both out now. But if you like space opera and you like an epic scope, and if you liked Dune, and if you like even a bit of fantasy, then this might well be the space opera for you. And number 26 is All Systems Red, which is the first of the Murderbot books by Martha Wells, which again I've read. And this one is introduces us to Murderbot, who's minding his own business, watching soap operas, and occasionally has to kill people in a frenzy of death and mayhem. It's a very brief read. It's a novella. It's like a palate cleanser. It's fun. I like the internal dialogue that the Murderbot has and his obvious disdain and yet duty to the humans that are around him. It was quite fun. I don't know. I haven't got any of the others, so I haven't read on. I don't know if I'd like to or not, but I did enjoy this one well enough. And then we've got The Three-Body Problem by Cixin. I think the other one might be in this list as well somewhere. Certainly, this is my rather nice broken binding edition, which I got recently. I will have the other two will appear at some point. I think the second one in December sometime, so in the next week or two. You know, it gets criticised along with the other two for being a bit dry. Maybe it lost something in translation. It is from a very Chinese perspective, unsurprisingly. The author's Chinese after all. And that is a bit different, maybe even a little bit jarring to Western ears. But I thought it was really interesting to have a science fiction tale told from a different perspective. And whilst it's got Western characters in it, most of the action is set in China or in space. I don't think I loved it, but I liked it well enough. Certainly enough to read the other two. I think probably Dark Forest of the three is my favourite. And number 24 is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which I really enjoyed. I've read it a few times, including slightly morbidly when the pandemic hit. So this is a post-flu pandemic book, a flu that, unfortunately for the people in this book, much more serious than COVID. Lots and lots of people died, well over 90% death rate. And this flashes between the events leading immediately up to that and immediately after it, and then in the future, when a roving band of entertainers performs things like Shakespeare in return for food and lodgings at their various communities that have sprung up around the Great Lakes. And I really enjoyed the links between the characters in the past and the future, and the links between the people that we meet and the events in the past. I thought it was really clever, and I really enjoyed it as well. Next, at number 23 is a book that I really want to read, having read the blurb just now. All the Fiends of Hell by Adam L.G. Neville, which was published just this year, actually. And you can tell from the cover, it looks awesome. The Red Knight of Bells heralds global catastrophe, annihilation on a biblical scale, and I am fond of an end-of-the-world book. Seeing the morning is no blessing. The handful of scattered survivors are confronted by blood-red skies and an infestation of predatory horrors that never originated on Earth. An occupying force intent on erasing the remnants of animal life from the planet. Across the deserted landscapes of England, bereft of an infrastructure and society, the overlooked can either hide or try to outrun the infernal hunting terrors. For a brand new book to have percolated into several people's consciousness as something they might consider in their top 10 is not bad going, actually. So I'm keen to get myself a copy of that and give it a read. It sounds a bit nuts, and I'm all up for nuts. In a complete change of scene, at number 22 is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, the first of the Wayfarer series. And this was published back in 2014. And this is a book I'm almost a little bit embarrassed to say that I really liked. Certainly I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to. I was ready to be cynical and middle-aged and male about it. But actually it kind of captured my imagination and tugged at my little old heartstrings a little bit. Not enough to make me like sob or anything, but I was really invested in the characters. I like the found family elements of it. And you could argue that nothing much really happens. It's just about the relationships between people on a spaceship. And like I say, I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. At 21 is Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson, which was published in 2015. And this is a generation ship tale that goes pear-shaped, as they often do. And there are debates about what to do. Should they carry on? Should they go to a different planet? Should they go back home? And there are factions and arguments and what have you. But it's the thing that I really loved about it was the description of life on the generation ship and how it was kept functioning and working, or not, as the case may be, over all those generations. Being Kim Stanley Robinson, it's really detailed, quite kind of hard science fiction in a flavour. And a lot of people kind of got a bit bent out of shape by the ending, but I quite liked it. Next, at number 20 is Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill, which was published in 2017. I was given this, I don't know, a year ago maybe, and I haven't got around to reading it yet. And it's a tale of the robot apocalypse. And let's see, humankind is extinct, which is unfortunate for all of us, liquidated in a global uprising by the very machines made to serve them. Now the world is controlled by one-world intelligences that have assimilated the minds of millions of robots. But not all robots are willing to cede their individuality, and brittle is one of the holdouts. So the humans have quit the scene or been quitted. So this is a tale of soul and humanity in robot form, I think. And it gets a good write-up, so I really should get on and read it, along with a lot of others in this list. At number 19 from 2005 is Old Man's War by John Scalzi, which I have read, yay for me. This is about an old boy who's 75 who signs on the dotted line to join the army. Earth is expanding into the galaxy, but there are aliens there and some of them need fighting. And Earth itself is now backwater with the bulk of humanity's resources in the hands of the colonial defence forces. But you cannot join the CDF until you reach retirement age, because they don't want young people, only those with the knowledge and skills amassed during decades of living. So that was his debut novel, and made quite an impact, I think. There are a few more in the series that follow. I haven't read those yet. Now, this book sounds properly bonkers. So where are we? Number 18 from 2005, The Carpet Makers by Andreas Eschbach. I'll read you the blurb. Since the time of prehistory, carpet makers have tied intricate knots to form carpets for the court of the emperor. Okay, so far, so not that strange. These carpets are made from the hair of the wives and daughters. They're so detailed and fragile that each carpet maker finishes only one single carpet in his entire lifetime. This art has descended from father to son since the beginning of time itself. One day, the empire of the god emperor vanishes and strangers begin to arrive from the stars to follow the trace of the hair carpets. And what these strangers discover is beyond all belief, more than anything that they could ever have imagined. I don't know, the premise of that sounds absolutely mad. The author is German. He's written a bunch of other books as well. The Carpet Makers was the first one to be translated into English. Carpets made of human hair. Next, at number 17, the second appearance for an Expanse book is Leviathan Wakes, which is the first of the series of 9 in the Expanse. And this is almost like a noir detective story. There's a detective who gets reincarnated, and we're introduced to the crew of what will become the Rocinante. The Jim Holden is the main character, and Detective Miller is the noir detective of the piece. And they're looking for one girl in a system of billions. But her parents have money, and money talks. When the trail leads him to the Scopuli and rebel sympathiser Holden, he realises that this girl may be the key to everything, etc., etc. So it's Holden and Miller as a double act with a supporting cast that go on to become Holden's crew. At number 16 is Under the Skin by Michael Faber, which was published back in the year 2000, so it only just made it into this cut. And this edition, the Canongate edition, is unusual in that it has, despite being a paperback, it has a wrap, which is translucent, and so you can't see the book underneath. Under the Skin, see what they did there. And this book follows a female character who appears to be human but is effectively hunting for meat in the form of stray humans, and she goes up picking up hitchhikers on the A whatever in Scotland, the A9 I think it is, and then they get farmed, and because the aliens of which she is one do like to chow down on a bit of human meat. This was his debut. It's macabre, beautifully written, totally entertaining, and ultimately deeply affecting. Under the Skin is a quite brilliant debut novel. At number 15 is The Martian by Andy Weir. You might have heard of it. The Martian follows Mark Watney, who's abandoned, assumed dead on Mars when his crew have to bail from their exploration mission because of a dust storm or something. And he's in fact not dead, and he's left abandoned on Mars to survive with not enough food. He grows potatoes in his own poo. You've seen the movie. And then gradually starves. And there are all sorts of attempts to save him that may or may not succeed. You have to read it if you haven't read it. It's not a particularly serious science fiction book. It's popular. It's written like an airport thriller, but I really enjoyed it. It's fun. I've read it a few times. And number 14 from 2004 is Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton. This is a chunky first part of 2 in what I think is the Commonwealth saga. The second one is called Judas Unchained. There are 2 follow-on series of 3 each, but the OG books are Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained. And we've colonized a bunch of planets where they're connected by wormholes. And this is a widescreen cinematic space opera of the best kind. I love it. I've read it a few times. And it's memorable chiefly for a really fantastic description of the evolution of some aliens on the planet, which is plays a part in this story, ultimately bent on galactic domination. I'm partial to a space adventure, and this fits the bill. At number 13 is Look to Windward by Iain M. Banks, and this is one of the culture novels, and this is a tale of revenge and involves the Massac orbital and a conspiracy and a secret mission to assassinate Hub Mind. It's all very complicated, but really well written and clever, and I really enjoyed it. Number 12 from 2017 is Borne by Jeff Vandermeer, who also wrote Annihilation and so on. And this novel takes place in the future in the ruins of a nameless city dominated by a giant grizzly bear called Maud. And the main character, Rachel, is a scavenger in the city. She collects various genetically engineered organisms and experiments that were created by the company, a biotech firm. And one day, while searching in Maud's fur, as you do, Rachel discovers a sea anemone-like creature that she names Borne, and then events progress from there. Next, we have a brace of Alastair Reynolds. At number 11 is Chasm City, which is a standalone book in the Revelation space universe. It's not part of the sequence, but you can read it, so you can read it on its own. And this was published in 2001. And this is set, as the name suggests, in Chasm City, which was a domed human city on the otherwise inhospitable planet Yellowstone. Chasm City isn't what it used to be. The one-time high-tech utopia has become a dark gothic nightmare, victim of the nanotech virus which has corrupted the city's inhabitants as thoroughly as it has the buildings. And now the city is a place of steam-driven machines, shadowy factions, and deadly new games. It's pretty gothic and almost Lovecraftian in its nature. I really liked it. And then at number 10 is Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. His first novel, in fact, from back in the year 2000, yeah. And it was the first book set in the Revelation Space universe. And actually, at the time he wrote it, he thought it was going to be a one and done. But then he was encouraged by the success to write more. And this starts off with an archaeological dig, and there are 3 parallel plot threads set at different points in time, because of the duration of the space voyages involved, eventually converge to the climactic end. It's great, very clever. Next is Stories of Your Life and Other Stories by Ted Chiang, a short story collection, which I thought I have a copy of, but I can't find it for the life of me, so I don't know where it is. And that's best known for containing the story which went on to become the movie Arrival. At number 8 from 2008 is Neal Stephenson's Anathem, which is a chunky old book, as many of his books are. And Fra Erasmus is a young Avout living in the convent of Sant Edar, a sanctuary for mathematicians, scientists and philosophers, protected from the corrupting influences of the outside world by ancient stone, honoured traditions and complex rituals. And if I remember, I've read this a few times, but it doesn't give any concessions to the reader. You just have to figure out what the hell's going on just by reading. There's no exposition particularly. You just follow the characters and the strange world that they live in, and you pick it up as you go. I really love the descriptions of life in the monastery. It's not a monastery, but it's effectively a monastery. At number 7 from 2014 is Annihilation by the aforementioned Jeff Vandermeer, which is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy. And this is set in a zone of weirdness, potentially alien in origin, somewhere on the east coast of the US, Florida-ish is what I've always assumed. Various missions have been sent into this zone and not come back, or if they have come back, they've been completely messed up. And so that by process of trial and elimination, they've discovered that women seem to fare better than men. So the 12th mission, I think it is, the 12th expedition is now just 4 women. It's kind of haunting, atmospheric, strange, weird, kind of off-kilter tale, and I did really like it. I haven't yet read the other 2. In fact, 3. There's a 4th one out now, and I really should. At number 6 is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which if you want cheering up one day is the book you absolutely should avoid. There's very little cheer in this book. It's bleak as hell. It's a post-apocalyptic tale where in the sort of ash-strewn remains of what we assume is the USA, and we follow a father and his son walk alone through a burned America, heading slowly for the coast for no obvious reason. Nothing moves in the ravished landscape save the ash on the wind, and they have nothing but a pistol to defend themselves against the men who stalk the road, the clothes they are wearing, and a cart of scavenged food and each other. And they get into various scrapes and trials and tribulations, and they are clinging on to survival. And the end is super poignant, but there is a glimmer, and that's all it is really, a glimmer of hope and humanity at the end. But otherwise it's, like I said, bleak as all hell, but really good and very well written. And number 5 is yet another book by Alastair Reynolds, House of Suns, which is not set in the Revelation Space universe. It's quite separate and standalone. And this follows a family of so-called shatterlings. They're clones. So Abigail Gentian split herself into 1,000 clones and launched them into the galaxy. 2 wayward shatterlings, Campion and Purslane, are about to be late for a gathering, decades late, for the Gentian line's 32nd reunion. Their crime is compounded by the fact that they have consorted, shared experiences together during the course of one of their galaxy looping circuits. So the thing that really blew my mind about this was the scale of it. There's a starship chasing this, which is covered in the course of a chapter or something, but in time and space covers thousands of years, just because of the speed that the ships are going and the distance that they travel is phenomenal. And you're talking about kind of laps of a galaxy and 250,000 subjective years of time, and there's hibernations to complicate things. And the Gentians are on the run. Someone's out to get them for reasons which don't become apparent till later. It's quite convoluted, but really good, entertaining stuff. At number 4 in this 21st century cut of my viewer survey is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which was a big hit a few years back in 2021 when it was published. It's going to be made into a movie. And I read this last year and I had a lot of fun with it. Like The Martian, it's not terribly serious. It's not mind-bending science fiction. It's not any difficult physics in it. But it is a bromance in space with a difference. And it's a lot of fun. And if you haven't read it, suspend your disbelief for a while, grab a big thing of popcorn and give it a read. It's really good. And number 3 is The Dark Forest by Cixin, which I don't possess a copy of anymore. As I said, I've sold it recently. And this is the second of the 3-body problem trilogy, and Earth is reeling from the revelation of a coming alien invasion 4 centuries in the future. The aliens' human collaborators have been defeated, but the presence of the Sophons, subatomic particles that allow the Trisolarans to spy on us, means that Earth's defense plans are exposed to the enemy. Only the human mind remains a secret, and this is the motivation for the Wallfacer project, a daring plan that grants 4 men enormous resources, whatever they want, to design secret strategies hidden through deceit and misdirection from Earth and Trisolarans alike. 3 of the Wallfacers are influential statesmen and scientists, but the 4th is a total unknown. An unambitious Chinese astronomer and sociologist is baffled by his new status. All he knows is that he's the one Wallfacer that the Trisolarans want dead. And I think Dark Forest was probably my favourite of the 3. And at number 2, from 2006 is Blindsight by Peter Watts. I've got it in this omnibus edition, and this involves a voyage out to the edge of the solar system to investigate an anomaly. And the human sort of crew is a motley collection of augmented post-humans, and in their crews can barely be called human, and what they face certainly isn't. So it's an alien encounter, first contact story, and you have to decide which are the most human, the aliens or the people in the ship that has come, in fact, from Earth. Really dark, quite difficult to understand what's going on quite a lot of the time. I've only read it once, and I think it would greatly benefit from being reread. But it does garner a lot of praise, and I'm not surprised it's at the top of this 21st century cut. But at number one is another book by Adrian Tchaikovsky, Children of Time, which is the first of what's currently 3 books. I think he might be writing a 4th. And I think the strongest of the 3. I really enjoyed this one. And this is a tale of the last remnants of the human race who've left a dying Earth, desperate to find a new home. And following their ancestors' star maps, they've discovered the greatest treasure of a past age, a world terraformed and prepared for human life. But all is not right at this new Eden. The planet is not waiting for them, pristine and unoccupied. New masters have turned it from a refuge into mankind's worst nightmare. Now 2 civilizations are on a collision course and must fight to survive. And as the fate of humanity hangs in the balance, who are the true heirs of this new Earth? This is a terraforming exercise gone wrong, or an uplift experiment gone wrong. The wrong species got uplifted, and they've got 8 legs, and it's really fun. So that was my 21st century cut of the survey data from the inaugural SciFiScavenger audience survey. And if you want to see the full results, the top 75 of all the books submitted by you all, then you need to go and look here. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye for now.